It's time, Cougar Nation. Cougar Tracks. The best season analysis with BYU insider Mitch Harper on KSL NewsRadio and on video every day on the YouTube page for KSL Sports.
Welcome into Cougar Tracks here on the KSL Sports YouTube and KSL NewsRadio, your legacy home of the Cougars. I am your BYU insider, Mitch Harper. It's Monday, February 2nd, Groundhog Day. Punxsutawney Phil saw his shadow. 6 more weeks of winter. Hey, I'll take this winter in Utah. It's great. Love this winter. The winter weather, though, in Kansas wasn't great. Very cold. And BYU was pretty cold, especially in that first half inside Allen Fieldhouse. And that's where we start things off with our top story of the day.
The top story of the day. The biggest story in the world of BYU sports right here on Cougar Tracks.
Tough loss over the weekend for BYU basketball as the Cougars fall to the Kansas Jayhawks 90-82. BYU drops 3 spots in the AP Top 25 poll from 13 down to 16 in this week's poll. Kansas jumped on BYU early. They were up 20 points at the half. Yet another game where BYU struggles in the first half. Think about the UConn game. Texas Tech, they were down at the half. Against Arizona, against Kansas. The biggest games this year, BYU consistently has slow starts. It's becoming an alarming trend with this BYU team. Super talented team. But the first half woes continue for this group, and this was Kevin Young on the first half issues.
Most of our struggles in the first half have been execution related. I didn't think that was the case tonight. It's hard to overcome 9 of 12 from 3. You have to give Bryson a lot of credit. I think he hadn't made too many threes on the year, and we were going to make him prove it, which he did, and we adjusted. Excuse me, but it wasn't just him. I mean, like I said, as a team, they go 9 of 12 from 3. So, and we were what were we? Like 4 or 16, I think. So, I mean, I've examined it 8 different ways to the moon and back, and at the end of the day, it's shot making. We're shooting a 3 at a much higher clip in the second half than we are the first, and that's something that you really can't necessarily fix. It's more about just trying to make sure you're executing, which I thought tonight we did for the most part in the first half. But like I said, the shot making out of them was remarkable.
And it was remarkable, especially in the first half for Kansas, particularly Darryn Peterson in the first half. Last 16 and a half minutes, though, in the second half, he didn't play. He was dealing with cramps, and he didn't even pop up on the availability report going into tonight's game between Kansas and Texas Tech. So it sounds like he's going to be good to go again on Monday. But in the second half, with Kansas up big, he didn't play. But in the first half, his shot-making ability was outstanding for Kansas, and that's where a lot of attention, obviously, in that game was on AJ versus Darryn Peterson. And AJ, he started slow, and you wanted to see him get some shots up a little bit earlier in that game. It took a while for him to get going. Wish he would have been able to counter the onslaught that Darryn Peterson had, because Darryn Peterson had some wow moments in the game. And look, you didn't want it to be a situation where it's AJ trying to, one-on-one against Darryn Peterson, but in that moment with so many NBA executives, I just wanted to see AJ kind of respond to that. I thought AJ in the second half did a really nice job. Richie Saunders was brilliant in this game, obviously career-high 33 points. But I thought AJ got settled in the second half. I thought he had a great finish at the rim on Flory Badunga, which very underrated, and it just shows the talent that AJ has. And if you were a AJ fan going in as an NBA executive, I still think you come out of that game feeling like you really like AJ Dybantsa still. But Darryn Peterson had more of the wow moments in a spot like that where everyone's keeping eyes on these heralded prospects heading into that game. And I said going into the contest that it was going to be the ultimate narrative game. People were going to make some just complete conclusions on that one game. And it was a tough spot for BYU going on the road, one of the toughest arenas in college basketball to win, super hyped crowd. I mean, there were so many things in that game where it was, the odds stacked against them. but you wish BYU would have played a lot better, and AJ needs to spearhead that. He's the number one guy for this team. He's got to have his biggest games against the biggest opponents, and that's going to be the task in front of him going forward. The nice thing is that AJ and this BYU team still have many more opportunities against quality opponents, but the opportunities are dwindling a little bit. Of course, things can change in a hurry. You got Oklahoma State this week and then Houston at home on Saturday. You win those two games, you're feeling great suddenly about this BYU team. But this was KY on his thoughts on AJ's performance against Kansas.
I thought he was okay. I thought he was holding the ball a little too much in the first half. I thought it was a little bit better in the second half. He was driving, getting to his spots, either for some of those turnarounds, or I thought he did a good job of kicking the basketball out. But and I'm not crying over spilled milk, but I mean the guy leads the country pretty much in fouls drawn. He got to the line 4 times tonight. I thought there was plenty of times where he could have been fouled that they missed, and that's life. You got to keep playing. But all in all, it was I thought a game for him that he handled well relative to like all the outside noise.
17 points, 6 of 12 from the field for AJ Dybantsa, 2 of 4 from 3, 3 of 4 from the free throw line, and all 4 of those attempts were in the second half for AJ. Again, if people want to say he's definitely not the number one pick, fine, whatever. That is what it is. I still think that he's going to be an incredible NBA prospect. You just want to see him deliver more of those wow moments in that game, because Darryn Peterson, he did deliver some of those wow moments, but then he doesn't play the last 16 and a half minutes. And that's, I wish we could have seen an entire 40 minutes of those two going back and forth. And honestly, I wish we would see BYU and Kansas again in Provo to have 2 matchups between these two guys. It feels like there's a little bit left on the table by the Big 12 to not have BYU and Kansas duking it out again. I mean, look at all the eyeballs that game generated in terms of College Game Day and all the interest nationally in the college basketball world. It was a big-time game. And that's what's unfortunate for BYU is you love that you're in those spots, but you wish you could have played better to begin the game, because BYU in these first halves, not good. They're just not. And I like the fact that BYU only had 7 turnovers in this game. Coming into the game, BYU was 14th in Big 12 play in turnover margin. Not good. They took care of the basketball a lot better, but in the first half, 6 turnovers, and Kansas had 13 points on those mistakes, on those turnovers. They capitalized. For the entire game, BYU finishes with 7 turnovers. Kansas had 15 points off those 7 turnovers. By comparison, Kansas had 6 turnovers. BYU only scored 5 points. That's a 10-point difference in a game that ends up being an 8-point margin. So that was a big stat right there. 3-point shooting, BYU hit 11, missed or attempted a total 32. Kansas shot 50% from 3, 11 of 22. BYU needs more from its bench, and that's something we'll talk a little bit more on the other side. But, BYU in a game where there was so much spotlight on the NBA prospects, thought AJ was fine, settled in the second half. You wish he would have started a little bit stronger in that game. But Darryn Peterson, props to him. I mean, he was effortless in some of the way that he was playing out there in those stretches, and it was an impressive showing from him and this Kansas team that clearly was looking very motivated. I mean, that was a completely different Kansas look than the one we saw a couple weeks prior against UCF, where they're losing in Orlando. And UCF's a good team. They just beat Texas Tech over the weekend. But that was a juiced-up Kansas team for that game, and they answered the bell in that spot. Let's take a break. On the other side, I'll get to the Cougar Stock Exchange, what's trending up and trending down for BYU basketball right here on Cougar Tracks. Welcome back into Cougar Tracks here on KSL News Radio and the KSL Sports YouTube page. Every day we're talking BYU sports here on the legacy home of the Cougars and KSL Sports YouTube and wherever you get your audio podcasts. So appreciate you for always being on board to the show, and you can always check out the videos on KSLSports.com. So many different ways to consume the Cougar Tracks podcast, and appreciate you always being on board with this program every single day. And on Mondays, each and every week on the program, we roll out the Cougar Stock Exchange. So let's dive in.
The Cougar Stock Exchange. What's trending up and what's trending down? It's the Cougar Stock Exchange.
Trending up for BYU basketball, pretty easy to say here. Richie Saunders. I mean, that guy is a dog. 33 points, 11 of 19 from the field. And what I love about Richie, too, and I've always said this really since the BYU went into the Big 12, where Richie's just kind of had this ascent as a player. Everything he does on the offensive end, you would think a high-level scorer like Richie, it's going to sacrifice something on the defensive end or on the effort, on the rebounds, on the glass. That's not the case. That is not the case. Richie Saunders ends up with 10 rebounds in this game. And just the difficulty of the shot making, quick catch and shoot off screens, brilliant stuff. And again, I talked about it on Saturday inside Allen Fieldhouse, but I hope with all the executives that were there from the NBA, hopefully, if anything, that became a moment where Richie Saunders established himself as a clear-cut NBA draft pick and a guy that needs to be in the conversation maybe for the first round of the NBA. I just think that Richie Saunders is a legit NBA guy. I loved it when I was back in my hotel room on Saturday night in Lawrence, and I'm watching ESPN. I was watching the Gonzaga-St. Mary's game, and Tom Crean, ESPN analyst, former Indiana coach, Marquette coach, and Georgia coach, he was on the halftime show. They were playing the BYU highlights, and he said, Richie Saunders, he's going to be a pro for the next decade. And I'm like, I love that because I just don't think people give enough flowers to how awesome Richie Saunders is. And hopefully this moment of him getting 33, even in a losing effort, can make people realize how special he is. A career high for Richie Saunders. I think just he can do it all in so many different ways. It was great to see him have a special day inside a historic building. And look, you don't want to tell Kevin Young, hey, what's it like being in these historic gyms? He's not all about that. And I love that too about Kevin Young, how he's not into the whole feel goods and like, what does it mean to do this? He wants to take BYU to greater heights and go into those spots and simply win. They got to go play better. Trending down, first half starts. We'll touch on that again. But this was KY on, all this numbers about, hey, they're great in the second half at least. So this is KY.
More offensively, I thought we were holding the ball way too much. I thought Rob did a great job in the second half of, driving, kicking, open things up for Richie. And so that's the blueprint, right? I mean, if I see one more analytic about how we're the best offensive second-half team in the country, I'm going to throw up. So it's like we got to make sure that we're doing everything in our power individually and collectively to, generate good offense in first halves of ball games. It's just hard to dig yourself a hole.
Love that take. Sick and tired of hearing about the second half best team in America with second half numbers. No. Be the best team over the course of 40 minutes. Let's start seeing that in the biggest games. Trending down as well, Moo Davis. 2 points, 1 of 6 from the field, 0 of 4 from 3. And I bring that up because Moo had a great second half against Arizona and was key in BYU's comeback effort against the Arizona Wildcats. Didn't show up in Lawrence. BYU critically needs Kennard Davis to be a knockdown three-point shooter. He has to be. A.J. Dybantsa only has 1 assist in the game. AJ had so many passes where he found the open guy. And that's, again, the thing with AJ's performance where if you get caught up in just simply the points, okay, 17, whatever. But AJ had these plays where he's finding the open guy. Guys weren't knocking down shots. How AJ ends up with only 1 assist is crazy to me because he was making some really good passes. Got to knock him down. And Moo Davis is key to that effort because all the effort that's going to be put into that big three for BYU, it's going to leave a Moo Davis open for many three-point looks. He's got to knock them down. In those 4 attempts, he's got to hit at least 2 of them. At least. And again, it was an 8-point margin to close this thing out. That's critical. They've got to get Moo Davis rolling. Also trending up, I'd say Rob Wright. I thought he had a solid game. And I liked how he got a little fired up at the end. He ended up with 18 points, and he made it a point to end that with a late bucket because Kansas had a bucket that you could have said, hey, just run it out maybe. Bill Self was asked about it. He said, hey, their starters are in. We're just playing, which I'm okay with. I don't care. But Rob Wright took it a little bit personal. He went coast to coast and took it to the rim. I like the chippiness. I thought I saw a little bit of that too early in the game. He's on the floor wrestling for a basketball. Little things like that I think will translate to March when you've got to get those 50-50 balls and that toughness factor. You know, when you're going to face a Houston and Iowa State in Big 12 play coming up, you got to be tough. You got to have a little bit of an edge to your game. And, you know, you don't want to get punked, as Kevin Young has talked about in the past. So having that toughness, I thought Rob Wright, solid performance from him. I think he's trending up. And also just the way that he takes care of the basketball, I thought that was really good to see from Rob Wright. Trending down as well, BYU can't get wins on College game day. Football, they're winless. Basketball, they're winless. You know, it's great for College game day to be involved with a BYU game, even though it wasn't in Provo. Hopefully, you know, they come to Marriott Center one of these days. They just can't get wins on College game day. And it makes you wonder, is the biggest stages just too big sometimes for BYU sports? I don't think so. I felt like BYU absolutely belongs, but you got to capitalize in these moments. So that's trending down as well. BYU will get back in action on Wednesday in Stillwater against the Oklahoma State Cowboys, who had a win over the weekend against Utah. Oklahoma State can fill it up. They got a good offense. Defensively, they give up a lot of points. We'll dive more into the Pokes later this week. But, you know, that's a tricky spot. BYU should win that game, I would expect. But, you know, this is a moment where real adversity is here. 2-game skid. 3 out of the last 4, BYU has lost. And none of these losses you look at and say, oh my gosh, hit the panic button. They're all top 25 teams. But at the same time, you start to have a little bit of doubt, a little bit of finger pointing. How does this team kind of respond to this adversity? It'll be a good spot for this team to see how they kind of gather themselves and get back at it coming up on Wednesday in Stillwater, which could be a little bit more of a sleepy arena potentially, but at the same time, BYU is a circled opponent. People want to see A.J. Dybantsa, one of the future NBA stars. So it gets people energized, revved up. So you got to get everyone's best effort. And you got to be ready for that. And so we'll see how BYU responds coming up on Wednesday against the Pokes. We'll have more Cougar Tracks coming up tomorrow and every day throughout the week and every weekday here throughout the BYU basketball season. That's going to do it for this edition of the show. Hope you enjoyed it. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcast, and I will talk to you tomorrow here on Cougar Tracks, and it's powered by KSL Sports.